This week on the Post Call podcast, we have an interview with a fellow podcaster, Dr. Taylor Brana. We recorded from a studio where rappers and artists, this is no joke, record in Philly. He has this whole setup. It's really cool. And we're going to talk about his philosophy on life and how to be positive. And he was a former Division I athlete, so we're going to talk to Dr. Taylor Brana coming up. Also, tips on how to decrease the number of phone calls and how to answer phone calls more efficiently in your practice. We will also take a closer look at how stigma around mental illness, more specifics around stigma and mental illness. Dr. Emi Okamoto, it joins me as always. And Dr. Okamoto, you are back in Cambodia as I can hear the birds chirping in the background.
Yeah, it's morning time here. It's night for you.
Yes.
Green as always, which is great. My 3 cats are awake and eating sardines out of a can right now.
That's really, I love that. But there's bad news on the cat front. One of them has an ailment.
Yeah, one of them's limping and I should take her to the vet, but it won't happen today. It will be on the weekend.
Today. All right. Well, cats have a weird sort of community. I watched a really sweet documentary called Kedi about cats on the streets of Istanbul, and cats know what they're doing.
Okay. All right.
He or she should be fine. She? He?
She. All she's.
She.
Yep.
All she's will be fine. But welcome to the Post Call Podcast. This is episode 52. We thank you for joining us this week and the record number of you that joined us last week when we talked about how to drink before work, not drink before work, and what to do if you're like, oh, no, actually, I'm on call, and they just called me in half a beer deep. So thanks for joining us on that. As we mentioned, coming up later, an interview with Dr. Taylor Brana, and we're going to talk about how to decrease the number of phone calls in your practice. But I wanted to start today with stigma around mental illness. This comes via Medscape. Americans increasingly view people with mental illness as a threat. A threat to what? That's really interesting.
Yep. Kind of sad to read, but that's just evolution of public perception.
So we're talking about this in the middle of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and this is this report written by Megan Brooks. Despite an absence of supporting evidence, Americans increasingly view people with mental illness as a threat. This comes from, I would imagine, a lot of things around, on one hand, things like domestic violence and then random acts of violence. But what did you think when you read this?
Yeah, I thought of our national dialogue about gun violence and how that gets so pinned and linked closely to mental illness, and how maybe we're portraying all mental illness as violent, which, a very small percentage is, but they're talking about people with alcohol dependence. 68% of people view them as dangerous. And people with depression, which, for the most part, depression, people are at most risk to themselves and not others. But I think something like over 60% of responders found them to be dangerous.
Right. And you don't really have to look at the data even to understand what's going on, especially for those of us who live in a metropolitan area. In my neighborhood, which is an old city in Philadelphia, I feel very fortunate to live here. There's a lot of substance abuse issues, a lot of heroin addiction, a lot of alcohol addiction. In my neighborhood specifically, though, I have 2 men who I've seen on the streets for years, 2 years or so now, who, after listening to the Psychcast with Dr. Henry Nasrallah, I feel pretty confident that one of them has some schizophrenia going on and another has quite a bit of mania, as we hear another fur creature there in the background, yes. Dr. Okamoto. So there's schizophrenia and mania, and I know that it's not a very comfortable situation to see these kind of episodes, but at the same time, it's not, to me, threatening, even though I suppose I could see how someone would see it that way.
Yeah, schizophrenia in particular, it's just, very unknown to people. At times they can have a very hard direct stare. I misspoke. 30% of people found people with depression to be dangerous, and 60% found people with schizophrenia to be dangerous. So what they need is help.
Yes.
And our compassion.
Yeah, and these things are, we're understanding more and more about the brain for a long time. We've known that these sort of afflictions, I know that there was scribe's fever and very gentrified words for these things centuries ago. But now as we start to understand more about the brain, these diseases are taking on pathologies much more akin to what we know about different parts of the body. So it's going in the right direction, but I think we kind of lump everyone with quote unquote mental illness into one box, and then they're kind of judged. And I think that's sort of what the problem. So how do you deal with this in the clinic? If this comes up with someone with mental illness and people who have questions about it, how do you non-stigmatize it? Is it on a patient-by-patient basis, or is it sort of on public perception basis?
Yeah, well, in the clinic, you just want to train your MAs and your front desk staff who are have a little less interaction through their training, just on how to gauge a patient and when they actually could be dangerous, because you do want to identify threats in the office, but it is fairly rare, and it usually is quite obvious when people are threats.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So you can read more about that by clicking the link in the podcast notes. Okay, before we get on to our next segment, a quick heads up. There is a story on MDedge Internal Medicine News. It's by Kari Oakes. Kari Oakes is going to be joining us in a week or two to talk about this. The hashtag #MyFirstNameIsDoctor was trending over the weekend, why it matters, and what you can do. You can read more about that. There's a link to it in the podcast notes, and we're going to talk about that coming up. I don't know if you saw that hashtag on Twitter. I know that you were busy traveling the world, but we're going to catch up, and we're going to have – it's something that we haven't really dived into on this show, but we are finally going to get into addressing physicians and who should address who, which way, and how to empower yourself to get that respect, and why it can help fight implicit biases. So that's going to be pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I'd love to see the data behind it in that article, which was very eye-opening for people.
Of course. And we had a former interview with Dr. Mara Antonoff. We're going to link to that and do all that stuff in that episode. That's coming up later in October. Okay, it's time for a tip on improving your practice's efficiency, coming to us from the beautiful people at Reddit. What's the solution to decrease the number of phone calls in your office? This is a pretty short post, so I'm going to read it to you. We are a 2-year-old practice and have 2 MDs and a possibly third joining in the next few months. Last month, I calculated 12 hours of phone time per day. The phone times are digitally recorded so I can track them. My front desk staff is literally on the phone all the time. My partner and I have been running all of the options of how to decrease phone call time, and honestly, we haven't come up with a great solution yet. Do you have anything that works? So without reading the thread, Emmy, what would you suggest?
Well, I read the thread, but I do agree is that, what can replace phone call time is probably online. So you think about, what are they spending their time doing? How much time does it take them to schedule an appointment? And how can you task shift to kind of an online portal, or maybe hire that out to a different phone company that can do that for you and triage in part for you. So that was a lot of the answers.
I thought that this one was particularly interesting. Used to be a medical assistant. Our front desk was incredibly well trained to be polite, but also to reduce what a patient is calling for and get to the solution. That's a talent. That's something that you'd want to pay for and look for and develop and train, because if you can get a group of people that know how to be on the phone and improve that, get in, get out kind of information, I think that's probably valuable as well.
Yes. Yeah. Patients aren't always trained on what to say. So train your staff on how to guide them. I did like this story when someone was like, I worked as a scheduler, and patients used to call to schedule and then say, "Oh, can I call you back when I have my calendar?"
And that's hilarious. I was just watching a viral clip of this sports radio guy, and this caller calls, and he's just like, "Hey, I'm pretty busy. Can I call you back? Or you give me a call in a little while?" No.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that. So you can read the entire thread and get the honest discussion in the podcast notes. Okay, so this is an interesting thing, again, from Reddit. I thought this was interesting because I've experienced this. I went to a bachelor party in Denver. Don't really know to go into detail, but I went to the ED, got stitches in my face.
Oh, right? That kind of bachelor party, huh?
That kind of no, it was not nearly that cool. Some legal marijuana and altitude, and I just fell over and hit my face. Wish it was a cool story. It's totally not. But I come home, and I've got some buddies that are in medicine, and one of them says, "Hey, don't go get your stitches out. Don't take them out yourself. I got it." Like, okay, fine. But technically, probably should have paid him. So people are adamant about how inconsiderate it is to expect free service from their friends. I had a professor who is a Pulitzer Prize winning photographer. Her wedding gift to her family is to photograph their wedding, but she hates being asked to photograph their wedding. What do you think about asking for $50 to perform a procedure or do something medical for your friends? And how close are the people who get it for free?
Yeah, it's a thin line, and everyone's been there. I mean, it starts in medical school and you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing or medical training to advise you, but I get it all the time from roommates, from family members. And the question is, you have a medical expertise that can be helpful to people, and how much should and can you help? Not even like a lot of people discuss, well, not even for payment, but just for drawing a line in particular. Do you prescribe meds for friends?
Right.
Some people do, others don't. But I think a lot of people noted that you actually would treat family and friends differently than you would your normal patient who walked into your office. Both your interaction with them and your ability to judge kind of their situation, to perform a good physical exam, to order different tests and labs and have their vitals.
Right. And I think that the real thing for me is when it goes beyond like advice. When I know the cliche that I know that nurses and doctors get all the time is, will you look at this rash? Well, no. What? No. Weird. But then when you start like reading things in here about ADHD and antidepressant medication, well, those are controlled substances, and the advice you keep getting is see your doctor. Go to your doctor. I'm giving you the stamp of approval. This is not a Google situation. Go to your doctor. And I think that makes a lot of sense. But also, I know that people, who know what's going on might want to call their friend and say, hey, I went to college. I'm smart. Will you please call me in a script for Tamiflu?
The UTI. Yep.
So I mean, and then this is what it gets into me, and I want to ask you personally, without naming names, how big is the circle that would get the script for Tamiflu theoretically or whatever in your life, and where is the line?
Oh man, probably inner circle, but Tamiflu is a unique one because that's a public health measure, and it can be diagnosed somewhat based on symptoms and has low risk profile. So Tamiflu actually is kind of a public health one, but I prefer not to be put in that situation.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah, but people did note that one of the best things they do, particularly in oncologist speaking, is, I don't treat my family and friends, but I help them interpret medical advice, because that's a lot of the ways we can help people. Is they go to the doctor, they get this report, and they've understood 20% of what the doctor says, and that's actually a very easy thing for us to do, is to help interpret what this means and put it in a more patient-friendly manner for our friends and family.
Absolutely. And building on that, my favorite response is the one that I think that I would get out of it as a patient. And if I give my friends, this says, a wise intending told me when I was in medical school to never undermine the patient's primary care provider when family and friends bring up medical issues. For one thing, you don't have the whole story. You're not taking full history. Like, you don't have all the labs and the history and everything that comes with a physical exam and charts. But the thing that you can do is help provide your friends and family with what they can ask their doctor. So you listen to them and say, here's what I would ask next time you go.
Yes. You help them be the best advocate for themselves that they can be, and educated.
Absolutely. So you can find that conversation. That's a really well done out conversation. A lot of people, some citing evidence and stuff. That's a really good one, and something that everybody has to deal with. So moving along, wanted to mention that our interview guest this week had, so I text him. He says, text me. And he says, do you want to meet up? My buddy's got a studio. Like, I kind of prefer to be in control of that because this is like my job and stuff. Like, all right, whatever. So we go there, and there's probably, there's like $350,000 worth of music stuff in this like dude's apartment out in a suburb of Philadelphia.
Wow.
And he's got pictures with people like Meek Mill and stuff in there. It was wild.
Oh, you have some work to do, Nick. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's like, yo, all right. And it's just like this whole setup. This guy has so much energy. Dr. Taylor Brana, he's doing all of this stuff. He's networking with people. He's finding music, and he's getting these studios, and he's doing all this crazy stuff. And he's the host and the producer of the Happy Doc. He's our interview this week, and Emi got a preview of the interview and did some digging. And so, what can you tell us about Dr. Taylor Brana?
Oh yeah, I love that thread of and his whole thing is, how to keep people energized through medicine and thinking of the very positive things that we can reflect upon. And I love that. And he was a gymnast. I was a gymnast as well, but he was a much better gymnast than I was.
He was elite for sure, but I didn't know. Yes. I didn't know that you were a gymnast. I knew that you were like, mean girl or captain of cheerleader or president or whatever you were.
You got to learn to do your backflips somewhere. Yep.
Yeah, that's true. And for those of you that don't know, the Mean Girl thing is a direct reference to the movie that is the voice of our generation, Tina Fey.
Yeah, I hope people know that. But I was not a mean girl. Thank you.
Oh, of course. It's October 3rd. Actually, it was October 3rd. Yeah, so Dr. Brana is all energy all the time. His story is really interesting because I liked how he talks about the importance of keeping an open mind during medical school and training about what you want to specialize and subspecialize in. I also, anytime I can talk to a former athlete, I like that because I think that high-level athletics is very metaphorical of how medical training and residency and being an attending goes. We had a former Dr. Julie Crowley. She was a runner at Texas, and he was a gymnast in school. That was crazy, but he's been in Philly for a long time. So it was a really great interview, and yeah, I'm pretty excited. He's the Happy Doc podcast. Did you listen to what he mentioned his strategy is? You look at the time, and they're really short, but then you hear his explanation. It's brilliant.
Potato chips. Yep. Once you
chips.
pop, you just can't stop.
That's so true. So I just had a bag of potato chips, and as we record this because you're in Cambodia, you're about to go to work, I'm about to go to bed. So how is it going in Asia?
Yeah, overall it's good. I am making some friends. I have a birthday party next week for one of the English-speaking friends I have here.
That's what you love to hear.
Yeah.
All right, so you take care of your kitty. What's Kitty's name?
Rada. She's actually playing with a piece of straw right now, so I think she's doing okay.
Yeah, so she's in pain, but she's still got it going on. Great.
Yeah. We'll keep you updated next week.
That's what we're all here. Honestly, you know what? Maybe you should send us a picture. She could be the official fur baby of the show.
Oh yeah, I got 3 of them though.
Oh, that's true. Can't show favoritism.
Yep.
Yep, got to be a good parent. Coming up next on the Post Call Podcast, my interview with the executive producer, writer, host of the Happy Doc, Dr. Taylor Brana. Emi, you gonna have a productive day?
Week.
Yeah, until next week. Welcome back to the Post Call Podcast. I am in this nifty studio in the western part of Philadelphia, Bala Kinwood, and I am joined by Dr. Taylor Brana. And we were going to get together. Usually I have these kind of conversations in my living room. He said, no, I got this studio. Let's come check it out. There's all this music equipment. I feel like this is the beginning of a award-winning album in here. But thanks for having me over here. So tell me where we are and how you got such a cool setup.
So this isn't my personal setup. Sure. This is my friend John's setup, actually. But I actually recorded an episode about this earlier. But all of this happened through the magic of putting myself out there, working on my own creative projects, and making friends and networking on the way. And basically, some of my entrepreneurial creative friends knew John over here, and now we're like really good friends, and we like connected right away. And there's just something really cool about believing in your creative journey, your own set of work, and connecting to people, and that's how this happens. So this isn't even in my studio, but I get to use this equipment, which is almost better, by the way.
But the real question is, does he let you crash on his couch whenever you want? Because I think that's probably the next step of being a producer for you.
Yo, Jay Diggy.
No. So let's get into it. We're talking because you are the host and founder and producer, president of the board of the Happy Doc podcast. So what is the Happy Doc? I see you have like 130 episodes. So what's it about? How'd you start it? And just give me the bullet points.
Yeah. So the Happy Doc podcast essentially started because I was exhausted in medical school, depressed. I'm a generally happy-go-lucky person. And long story short, I wanted to reach out to doctors that were happy, find out how to create fulfillment in medicine. And so this podcast is a source of inspiration, fulfillment. We reach out to happy doctors. I provide some inspiration, some tips, some thoughts to give you that little spark of joy, that little dose of joy if we're talking about medicine, right? And essentially creating that sense of fulfillment to create a better life for yourself, a better life for your patients, and ultimately carve out a happier life that we're all looking for.
So how many years ago was that?
3 years ago.
So you've been doing it for 3 years. What have you learned? I tell this to people who want to start. The beginning steps of starting a podcast are annoying. Like you got to find the host, you got to figure out your brand and get all this stuff. Once you get into it, the routine, it does become routine. You feel confident in yourself. But what did you learn about yourself, and how hard were those first 6 weeks to 6 months?
Oh, starting a podcast has a heavy learning curve for sure, because a lot of people think about it just as the recording piece, like what we're doing right now. Right. This is the fun part.
Yeah, this is easy. This is the end of the process.
This is like the joy of chatting with someone. Sure. Everything else is the hard part. And actually, to take a step back, in my 4th year when I really started making this serious. Most people go on vacation at the end of 4th year because they've matched, they're going into residency, what have you. That was the hardest 3 or 4 months of my life. I woke up early, I went to bed late, I researched, understood how to make a website, how to record. I started listening to other podcasts, I learned how to ask questions, I learned all of this stuff, and I sucked. So what did I learn through the whole way? I learned that no matter how much research you do, you got to practice, you got to put in the work, you got to enjoy the process. You're not going to do a good job. I've spent so many times making mistakes. I've recorded episodes and lost them completely. I've recorded episodes and lost or had extremely poor quality audio to the point that it wasn't going to work. I've had episodes where I recorded with a really big guest and did not put in my due diligence to do the research, and I looked like a complete idiot. And so I
laugh because I've been there.
Yeah. And so, what I've learned honestly is the path to be really humble and just to continue to learn throughout the whole way. Every guest, I thought I would hit a point where I'd get bored and I would just like reach this end where I'm not learning anything.
Sure.
I'm always surprised.
Yeah, I find that that's the case as well. And not just with quote unquote podcasting, but with any sort of expression. What I really find fascinating about your story is that you turned to this medium as a way to solve a problem that you had. There weren't necessarily grand aspirations of being like a keynote speaker. It was like, there has to be somebody who's not miserable doing this. Let's find it and let's figure out how to do it.
Right.
But throughout that continuous growth process, do you still get that out of it?
Just to rephrase the question a little, get what out of it?
Do you get do you get your answers to, is there someone else? How do I be a happy dog?
Yeah. I think what I'm realizing, like, kind of like, I'm making a weird example there, but like how Batman's kind of like a symbol.
Sure.
You know, like
the Dark Knight, of course.
Yeah. So when you think about the Dark Knight, like Batman isn't just like a human; he's a symbol for Gotham, right? So I feel like the Happy Doc to me is transformed into this symbol of a happy physician, right? So what I am starting to see is every person I interview, every book I read, every guest I have on, they're different components of the Happy Doc, these slithers of pieces. So at this point, what I'm looking for are these hidden gems, ideas, routines, concepts, learning tools, so that each and every person, as they listen to every episode, they're getting closer and closer to that Happy Doc, which is whatever that means to them.
Yeah, and what does it mean to you?
Oh, man. That's a fantastic question. Happiness, to me, is getting as close as I can to being able to keep my energy cup full. And what that means to me is to be, and as I literally was just talking about this, having a sense of alignment, believing in what I'm doing, speaking the truth of what I'm doing and acting in accordance to that. So being as aligned to my internal authentic self as possible. And I know that's a bunch of like mumbo jumbo, but long story short, I love being creative. I love doing work like this. I love connecting. I want to make people happier. So me being in this path of health, wellness, building all these creative opportunities out, that's what it means to me to build my personal happy life.
Here on Post Call, we try to find similar stories or people that, cool hobbies or research that's not necessarily clinical, that like kind of impacts the space. Or we've been really fascinated with narrative writing and poetry and clinically reviewed journals, which is really fascinating to me. We had a psychiatrist who is a high-level concert pianist, and I find that when you have something to look forward to, that at the end of the day that is almost like an unsolvable puzzle, it gives you a sense of fulfillment. And when you can marry those two things with your career and your expression, say perhaps you would want to do a podcast about Batman, but you like podcasts, this is your career, and you can do those two things together. It's like a nice circle of an expression of your day job.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as you're saying this, I'm totally in agreement because medicine, for example, as a field, especially since we're talking about lifestyle and those types of things, like medicine is such logic. It's all about this kind of, medications, reactions. This is side effects. This is what you need to do for
data in, data out.
Data in, data out. Complete logic. And I feel like you need the opposite. You need the massage of the brain, the creative massage, that artistic piece. The thing about art, art in whatever form you think about it, is there, like you said, it's unsolvable. It is messy. It is a spectrum of possibilities, and it is so unlike medicine that you, and I talk about this with my guests a lot, the creative expression of doing whatever it is that you're doing, dancing, music, podcasting, whatever it is, it actually makes you better at the logic. And in fact, you come back to it with a new sense of energy and vigor. So I think it's totally within lines of what you're talking about.
How do you think it's impacted you at your work as a physician? And have you ever seen a direct example?
Yeah, I mean, first off, being a podcaster is a fantastic way of getting better at public speaking. And I think me understanding the process of asking questions and the process of asking questions has allowed me to tremendously impact my way of thinking with patients, because when I'm with patients or when I'm with a podcast guest, sometimes I can tell that they're confused or they're not getting it, and I might have to rephrase the question. I have to be a better questioner. So that's direct with medicine. The big thing is because I'm loving my life outside of work, I come back to work with more energy, and that translates into me actually working more effectively. So quite honestly, this could be what that question you asked me could be a book, if not an entire podcast episode. There's so many things I've learned through it.
Well, I look forward to getting the email asking to write the foreword for that book. I want to switch gears a little bit, and I always do this after we get into the bones of why we're talking. I want to know more about you. Why, first of all, your bullet point resume. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you do undergrad? Where'd you do med school? Why'd you want to be a doctor?
Sure. So grew up in California, West Coast, best coast.
Whoa. Which part though? That's a whole country out there.
NorCal. So
okay, that's a very important country.
I grew up in the Bay Area and absolutely loved it. Lots of sun, great people. Fun story. Big part of my story is I compete in gymnastics since I was 6. So I was a competitive athlete. Very good. Was in the national training team for quite some time, and
wow.
So did a lot of really cool stuff with gymnastics. So there's that competitive part of me, and that's basically kind of to move forward. That's why I got excited with medicine, because I was always interested in reading stuff on how to optimize my body, nutrition, exercise. So naturally gravitated towards that. I actually thought I was going to go into PT school. And initially went into pre-PT, took my pre-med courses, did well in college, and I thought, you know what? I also was considering medical school, so I was in between. Like, I knew I wanted to be a doctor of some sort, and I wanted to be a specialty field in health, and then did the prereqs and, started to really think that being a physician might be the path. I wanted to be a leader, And I felt like physicians were leaders in their field.
Sure. So where'd you go to med school?
Med school, went to PCOM here in Philly, Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. Loved it. I love the DO philosophy as well. I didn't say undergrad. Undergrad, I went to Temple.
Oh, cool.
Temple
So you've
here
been in
Philly.
this area for a while.
Yep. I've been here for I think this will be my 10th year.
I was going to guess it's going to be 10, 15 years in that range.
Yeah, 10 years at least.
We had on a couple episodes someone with a very similar path from California to that med school was Shani Tussonian. Are you familiar with Shannon Tussonian? You guys are around the same age. She's a fellow in GI at Einstein.
she goes to my program.
Yep.
Yeah, I know her.
Yeah, absolutely. She's a guest. She's great.
I didn't know she's from California, actually.
She went to UCLA.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, she's SoCal.
Oh, that's why.
See, it's like a whole thing. It's like Pittsburgh and Philly. It's not the same.
Yeah.
Because it's Austin and Houston not on the same page.
Yeah, there you go.
So now that you're going through med school, you're in a different place. You've kind of reacclimated. You're putting down roots. Be careful. You'll start picking up the accent here. With every year, you're going to start saying things like wooder. So now that you're here, how did you choose your specialty, and how do you feel about like where your life is at right now?
Yeah. So I always thought I would go into probably primary care, most likely family medicine or peds. The reason I thought family is because you get to do everything, and I like lots of stuff. Peds, I'd worked with kids my whole life, and I did a lot of coaching when I was younger. I have like a lot of energy. I love kids. It's great. When I went into peds, it was so monotonous for me, and I was bored out of my mind. So it just did not work. Family, when I actually saw the practice of family medicine, I realized how bombarded the field was with what, unfortunately, I would say is a lot of checklist medicine, given a lot of the requirements. And so I wasn't as enthused about the practice of it in real life. Psychiatry was the only field I saw where a lot of doctors appear to be pretty happy and still able to have a good lifestyle. For me particularly, I knew inside I had a lot of creative ideas I wanted to work on, and it was the one field I felt like I could mix things like this, podcasting and other creative ideas within my career, and I felt like there's a lot of flexibility, and that's definitely, at least I know for a fact, true in psychiatry. Through podcasting, I'm learning that all specialties have a lot of flexibility, and you can really carve your life. So for those people who feel like they can't find happiness in whatever specialty it is, there's always a creative way to build your life in a better way.
It's really interesting that you say that. A couple of things I want to build off of. The first thing I'll say is that I agree. It's what's really interesting about different specialties, and in different spaces, there are specialties that are really dominating. Like the podcast space, all medical podcasts, in my opinion, owe a debt to emergency medicine. They broke the ground on this, and their community in the podcast space is absurd, which if you had to guess, I would guess that psychiatry would have done that because that's the talking specialty.
Right.
But you owe a debt to those guys. So like you're 100% right. I would assume that every specialty will have pockets like that where you can find your way and you can build up things around you. The other thing I wanted to dive deeper into is how cool it is, or how important it is through your training process to give other specialties a chance. So you go in with an idea that I think I'm going to like these things, and then you go on rotations, and getting that boots on the ground experience punches you in the face. You're like, nope, not for me.
Yep, absolutely. At the end of the day, you don't actually know what you're going to like until you taste it. If you believe in your head something, I'm the psychiatrist here, right? Your mind and what is actually true are different, and quite often you have to test it because your thoughts aren't you. And this plays out in, literally, I'm having conversations with patients all the time, specifically around this topic. Taste things. Don't look at things at face value. Try it. Look under the hood. See if it's for you, and you might surprise yourself. I've heard this story time and time again with medical students, residents. I know a couple of residents that switched out of the specialty they went into because they realized, crap, this isn't for me. So it is never too late to change your path.
Yeah, I've used these words from William Faulkner on the show a few times, and I think it's just one of the best ways to live your life. Faulkner famously wrote, "Don't be a writer, be writing." So it's like you think of yourself as, I am a pediatrician, but that's not what you're trying to do. You need to think of yourself, I treat children.
Right.
And if that's not for you, then having the moniker of pediatrician is not as fulfilling as doing the thing you want to be doing.
Right. You're an action and not some descriptor of that action, right? And that's really powerful. I actually say this a lot because a lot of people define themselves as a doctor, they define themselves as a specialty. No, you're a human. Right. And humans make mistakes. Humans aren't perfect. Do whatever it is you're doing, and it's okay if your human path does not feel aligned with what you're doing. Take a step back, reflect, look at it. I mean, what you said was really powerful. I agree with that.
I like to think that I thought of that, and I think that I did, but then I read that quote from Faulkner, like, oh, that's what I've been trying to say.
Yeah. You're like,
exactly.
That person said it a lot better.
Yeah, the guy, the Nobel Prize winner, he was on the money.
Yeah, exactly.
80 years ago, not me.
Yeah.
So I started my career in sports media. Now I do medical media. One of the best decisions in my life to get out of that. But one advantage that I had when I made the switch was that the lifestyle of physicians reminds me quite a bit of the lifestyle of high-level athletes because your day is scheduled out.
Yep.
Every single second can change an outcome of how things work out for you.
Yep.
And the commitment, people have no idea what's going on under the hood. And now I didn't know that about you, that you were a high-level gymnast, and so you know as well as anyone else. But gymnastics, perhaps different than the metaphor I use, which is team sports, because you've got your attending physician, your residents, and the team. Gymnastics, you are on your own.
Yeah.
How does that translate into your career?
Well, I would say in general, it used to be that I was on my own. I will say with a little bit of a difference in the U.S., like the college gymnastics kind of.
Like there's duels and stuff, right?
Yeah, there's duels, exactly. So there's meets where it's like Temple versus Penn State. But yeah, and Penn State's going down. Anyways, but so the team atmosphere was changed, but for all intents and purposes in medicine too, and in life, like at the end of the day, you're running your own race, right? And so in gymnastics, this is the real powerful thing about it is if you want to be a better gymnast and you have some goals to set, like no one's going to push yourself except you. You have to go into the gym, you have to go into the equipment, you have to practice, you have to work on specific skills that you're weak on. And you have to know what those skills are. And if you're avoiding it, you're going to mess up at the competition. You got to be prepped. You got to be ready to go. When it's competition time, everyone's watching you and you got to perform. It's a lot like medicine. If you're weak in a certain area of medicine, if you're not studying enough, or if there's a certain procedure you're not as strong in, you got to review. And the only person that is going to really know what you're lacking is you, because you're the one in your head and you can sense that. So there's a lot of corollaries. And quite honestly, I'll say this too. I've found a lot of benefit because I was essentially a master at the sport. And when you get good at mastering something, it gives you a lot of confidence in mastering other things. So that was a really huge benefit for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've noticed that as well. And you see sometimes people were like, I was an athlete and now I'm a this. It's because they were drilled as a young person. If you really want it, this is the work that needs to go into it.
Right.
No one cares about how you feel. You have to crush it every day.
Right.
And then eventually you will be rewarded. The other thing that I will say is it's very much like a glacier. You see these posters where 90% of what's happening is underneath the surface.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I played hockey at a high level, played North American juniors. And what I tell people is that, and I know this is true with medicine as well, that everybody likes to play the game. Everybody likes to compete. The real thing you have to ask yourself is, do you like the constant improvement? Do you enjoy practice? Do you enjoy those interactions with the people around you? Because I get a lot of inspiration from our oncology host who says, this summer he said, I don't miss my family. They're at the beach. I don't miss my family today. I've got a brand new New England Journal of Medicine. I can't wait to read the whole thing cover to cover tonight. Like that's what I'm talking about. That's the work that people don't see that goes on under the surface, which is what you're doing with the Happy Dog. It's different because you're in the public eye, but it takes, like you said, those months of waking up every day and doing stuff that no one's going to know about.
And what you just said there is so powerful. The discipline, the internal discipline is the only way you will separate yourself in anything. There's no way around it. And as a person who used to try to skirt around different corners, I can tell you there's no other way to do it. What you said with the glacier, I use a different analogy. I say the root work. And when you look at a plant, you're seeing the tree and the fruits, but where's that coming from? That's coming from the roots. You have to till the soil. You got to put the water in. Everyone that you appreciate in life, that you're looking at, that you think is amazing, the cars, the nice clothes, the success, whatever, that's all fruits. But the thing is if you're actually successful, you don't care about the fruits. You got to be working on the soil game. You got to be doing the discipline. You got to be doing the work, and the fruits come out of that, but that's not the focus. So that's another lifestyle thought right there is, are you doing root work or are you doing fruit work?
Well, it's like you said earlier, too, in your conversations that you have with your patients. Like if you have an open mind to understand, and this is why podcasting is so great because, and I talked to Shani D.O., if you have a medium that you feel comfortable expressing yourself in, then you should do that. But you also are going to get yourself in trouble if you're faking it and you want to be a podcaster. Well, like doing the work, if you like it and you want to sit down on your computer and you want to record, that's what you should be doing. If you don't pretend to be an Instagram model, if you don't love the photogenics and the filters and that style, you've got to be honest with yourself.
So it's funny you're saying this because one of my episodes coming up soon at some point will be Don't Do It for the Likes.
Available in the show notes.
It's going to be coming at some point. But like, because if you're just doing it for this superficial level reason, it's actually what you were saying earlier. Do you enjoy the action of doing it, or are you looking at for some external reason? Because you're going to burn out. There's not enough long-term gain for you to do it for some like Instagram likes. And in fact, I think Facebook and Instagram are taking off the likes. They're taking off the likes anyways.
I heard that Twitter's doing something similar actually.
Yeah. So if you have some superficial gain, it's the same reason why you don't want to become a doctor for money. Number one, doctors don't actually make that much money when you look at the amount of burden you're taking on. And number two, you're just going to burn out so fast. So there has to be a deep-seated reason.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. So in order to wrap up, let's talk about the Happy Doc and what's coming up. You've alluded to some upcoming episodes, and off air, you and I were discussing, got some exciting things coming out with voice speakers.
Yeah. So upcoming, I mean, I'll just drop this right now in this episode. So one of the episodes coming up is actually I interviewed David Meltzer. He is the CEO of Sports One Marketing, one of the biggest actually like sports agencies in the country.
They have a lot of NBA players, I think.
Yep.
I would recognize that name, yeah.
Yep. And he's pretty big in the entrepreneur and sports world as well. And what I would want to say about the Happy Doc is even though we want to find happy doctors, my creative expression allows me to understand that success is not just in the physician space. It's all over. So we have to reach far and wide, and we have to cross-collaborate and find new ideas from different spaces if we're going to find happiness in our own space. So reaching out to these people is amazing. So guests like David Meltzer has been really powerful. I have a couple of other physician guests, but every episode is just so different. So I want you guys to check out the podcast, and you can just search The Happy Doc, and you'll find out more.
The Happy Doc podcast will be available in the show notes, wherever notes are found in your app on this episode. I believe the website is thehappydocpodcast.com. There's an email address if you want to give some reviews. Also, everybody, we like politely to ask for 5-star reviews. And if you have thoughts, read the reviews, we answer questions, and we take that seriously. And I'm sure you do as well. The last thing I want to say is you had a really fascinating approach to the Happy Doc, which was you called it the potato chip method. So you'll notice when you look at these episodes, some of them are 5 to 10 minutes, but some of them are 40 minutes. So you explain what you're doing.
Yeah, so the potato chip method, now I'm giving away a secret here, but anyways, so the potato...
We all know what potato chips are.
So you guys have had an entire bag of potato chips.
Today, actually.
But how did that happen? You started with 1 or 2 potato chips, and you're like, this is pretty good. I'll have a couple more. And then all of a sudden, the bag is gone. So when it comes to content, if you enjoy someone, you watch a minute, you listen to a couple minutes. Oh, wait, I just listened to 10 episodes. Wait a second. So the micro content is a way for you guys to feed into the system, understand if this is something you're going to enjoy, and then all of a sudden you're listening to a bunch of episodes.
And all of you, if you think you're disagreeing, I know you're not, and let me tell you why, because you don't have time to watch that 3-hour Marvel movie, but all of a sudden you've wasted an entire day on a season of The Sopranos, which is twice as long, but you did it because there were chapters. That's exactly what you're talking about. Right? I mean, it's binging. It's binging.
Absolutely. And I think our world is heading into this space with different varying levels of content, micro and macro content. And so it really gives the consumer of content a lot of room to play. So it's interesting methods.
It's going to be exciting going forward. Medicine is finally knocking the door down in the podcast space, and I'm excited that you're there, and I'm excited that we're there. He's Dr. Taylor Brana. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. This is really fun, and I'm glad you got to ask me some questions.
Yeah, we'll have to do it. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Sounds good.